Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we are learning to be creative every day. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Oh, welcome back to this episode of the podcast. I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and I'm excited to be here today. There's been a lot going on this past week. I hope, first and foremost, that you and your family is healthy and safe, and also in a place where you are still enjoying photography. You know, not all of us can get outside, go places, do new things. And that's typically where we would bring our camera and take photos. And if we can't do that right now, hopefully you're able to find something that is still keeping that spark of joy when it comes to photography alive. And I think that if you're listening to this podcast right now, you're probably in that spot. Otherwise, if you've lost all hope for photography, you probably stopped listening a long time ago. So I know for me personally, even though it's been 5 months since I shot my last wedding back in December. So 6 months? No, it would have been the 13th. 5 months. Anyway, since I shot my last wedding in December, this week I decided to, do something different. And while I can always take photos of the kids or, on walks or something like that, there's something a little bit extra to wedding photos and engagement photos that gets me really excited. So this past week, I decided to actually put my Animoto subscription to good use and make a bunch of photo slideshows that I can then post on social media throughout the year for my business. And honestly, so the whole process, oh my gosh, it was so much fun. The whole process of looking through my images, looking through whole weddings, looking through engagement sessions that I did here in the past couple of years. It was just so much fun. It was just so much fun. You can almost relive those moments, right? Because when you, as a photographer, go out to an engagement session, you're typically only meeting with that couple, a handful of times. And the engagement session is really the first time where you're spending some time, you're behind the camera, you're doing what you do, they're enjoying themselves, and then you can still deliver that experience to them. And it's very memorable. So when you go back and you look at your photos, you can almost relive that hour-long, walk along the trail or down by the river or something like that. You can almost relive those moments and remember what it was that you were talking about while you were shooting. And that, these photos, they're not even for me. They're not, I don't hire couples to, photograph them so that I can have memories that last a long time. They hire me to photograph them so that they have moments and these memories that last a lifetime. And yet I'm still over here reliving all of these memories, and it's still very it's just exciting. It's fun. It is so much fun. And I didn't think, very rarely do I ever truly go back and dive through my images. And this was just, it was just a good time, and I spent the whole day creating a ton of short slideshows through Animoto, which is always really quick. And at the end of the day, it's funny, I found out that my cheeks were actually hurting. Like the top of my cheeks were hurting from smiling all day, just looking at these images and reliving this whole wedding day or these hour-long engagement sessions. I was smiling the whole time while looking at these photos, even kind of like laughing in my head a little bit. And my cheeks hurt from smiling the entire day, as if I was at a wedding. And thinking back to these wedding days, you create these slideshows. It just really, really got me excited to shoot again. So hopefully, once again, you can find something like that in your life. I actually put together a list of 37 totally non-salesy marketing ideas, just like this one. This is a marketing idea, which was to create slideshows and post on social media. And this one right here is definitely one of my favorites. But I created an entire ebook with all 37 marketing ideas, and I want to give it to you because I know that right now if you are not out shooting and you want to be shooting and you want to be making money with your camera, right now is when you can put in the time and the effort to be able to create all these marketing ideas so that when the time comes, you can be in the best spot available. So I want you to download it now. You can get it actually in the show notes of this episode, totally free. Just give them a try. There's a ton of ideas. And if you're, as I said, looking to make some money with your camera, I know that there's going to be a marketing idea in this free ebook that you can download that is going to work for you. So download it now in the show notes of this episode, episode 198. I can't wait to hear which one works best for you. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get on into today's interview. Today's interview is with Ashley Marston, which a lot of you may remember. She is a birth and family photographer from British Columbia, Canada, who was actually back on the podcast in episode 139. It's been we've come a long way, which to this day is actually one of the most downloaded episodes of the podcast. And I think it's just because she really made a huge impact. It's probably from the amount of people going back and listening a second or even a third time. So Ashley has actually received a lot of awards from the International Association of Birth Photographers for her work professionally, but also her work has been recognized by National Geographic on a personal level. Her personal photos have been recognized by National Geographic, like of her family. This is fantastic. So today we are talking all about personal work and just how to be creative every day. When did you know that photography was going to be an important part of your life?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that I think like a lot of photographers who are moms, the answer would be when our children were born. However, I think that it amped up a little bit for me when our second son was born, and my husband, it was an all of my births have been interesting, but the second birth I ended up being put under general anesthetic, and when I had to go in for an emergency C-section, so I wasn't able to see him being born, and didn't meet him for 3 hours afterwards. And when I was rolled into the room and my husband was there standing with him, he placed him in my arms and I said, grab the camera and take a picture. And it's the most beautiful photo of me meeting my son for the first time, which, you know, my husband took, but it was that photo that does something to me that I can't quite explain, that really nails in the importance of photography and the importance of what I do as a mother and as a photographer and a birth photographer as well, how important photography is to people and how important that photo was to me. So I think it just brought it up another level. The healing power of that photograph for the trauma that I felt during that birth was huge. Like, it just brought me so much peace after all that sort of turmoil that I felt in the coming weeks after that birth.
So I know oftentimes as photographers, you know, we can be really critical of a photograph, whether it be the technicals, whether it be the moment, whether it be the lighting and all these things. Would you say that that photo was technically a good photo or a bad photo? Like if you had to guess, what was it about that photo that made you love it so much?
Technically, considering that my husband took it on just a just a whim, like, you know, it is technically a perfect photo. And I think that, of course, I have a strong connection to it because it's a photo of me, but I think it really just speaks to the healing power of photographs, really. And I don't think that I really understood what that meant until that photograph was taken and I saw it. And before that moment, I had been, you know, shooting families, very sort of cookie cutter images. And it was after that that I completely changed the way that I ran my business. So.
How so? Can you give me an example of how you were shooting before and after that moment?
Well, I think, it was, it was 2011. And so, people were still wanting these perfect photographs of, happy, smiling families, all looking at the camera, everybody perfectly dressed. There was a lot of jeans and white t-shirts at that time still, um, and so that's what I was shooting because that's what everybody wanted. And, after that moment, I started shooting more moments of my family rather than like every Easter I'd plop them in front of a backdrop with, tulips and Easter eggs around them. And then I kind of just stopped doing that. I started just shooting more of a documentary style in home situation. And then I very quickly got pregnant with our second child. Our two youngest children are 11 months apart. And so it was after the birth of my third child that I started doing births, started shooting births, and then stopped doing any kind of posed client work at all. I did newborn shoots where I would drag a suitcase to their door full of props and a newborn bag, and I'd sweat it out in a hot room with a newborn for 4 or 5 hours trying to get the baby to sleep.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds really nice. And I just stopped doing that. And I remember like putting that out into the world and being like, I'm not going to do these newborn sessions anymore. I'm going to focus. And I had examples of like in between moments that I was capturing. And I said, like, this is what I want to shoot. And so if you want these kind of photographs, then I'm your girl. I'm your photographer. And I actually thought that nobody would book me. I was like,
Wow.
Everybody's going to be like, I want Ann Geddes. I want my newborn with a flower on her head and dressed like an elephant. And, and I thought nobody's going to go for this. And luckily that wasn't really the case. So I think that it was that photograph that really kind of turned things for me, and then launching into birth photography and just realizing that I wanted to extend, the moments out into every little aspect. So I started shooting my family sessions that way and lifestyle newborn sessions, and then eventually moved into day in the life sessions. And then in that time, I started my first year of a 365 project with my own family, which has now been going on for 6 years. So it just kind of.
I mean, that's a milestone right there. That's incredible.
At this point in time, I don't know if I could live without it. Like it's become such an integrated part of our life that it's like breathing. Like I don't know how I would exist without it, which seems weird because you think, oh my God, but when you do something every day for that long, it becomes habitual. So that's where I'm at this point. So
yeah, it's interesting because I'm really excited to talk about your course, which is called The Daily Occurrence Creative Every Day. And I was looking in getting ready for this interview, I was looking at some of the reviews of your course, and they all talk about how everybody's so excited to do a 365. Everybody's so excited to start capturing their families and doing these projects, and in part because of you, in part because of Jenny Stein, we all started in the Beginner Photography podcast doing a photo a day project. And we started in January, so we're now, well, by the time this interview comes out, almost 6 months in, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite a ways. But I know that pretty early on, everybody was good for about a month, maybe a month and a half. Things started to slow down. Life gets in the way.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that at some point, even though it gets hard, it gets tough, at some point you get that second wind and you just break through it and it becomes easier?
Yeah. Well, and the hard part about 365 projects is that everybody starts them in January. January is a tough month. January, February, they drag out like,
Oh, they do.
Oh my God, like, is it over yet? And so you're trying to stay creative, in this time where, a lot of you live in places where it's still got 2 feet of snow. You're inside, you can't get outside with your kids. And so I promise everybody, we just got through our 100th day and I was like, okay, where's everybody at? Like 100 days is a big deal. right? And you do kind of break through as spring is starting, the days have gotten longer, you get a bit more color out there in the world, the grass is getting green again, there's trees are blooming again. You do definitely get a second wind. Absolutely. And it does, it ebbs and flows. Even in my own work, I mean, I've been doing this for how long? There are weeks where I'm like, I am just shooting nothing but garbage. Like, like, and then I have to go back in my mind to my, my beliefs and my goals and who I'm doing this project for. And I'm like, so what if all the photos from last week are getting 50 likes? The basis and the heart of this project is that, this is a love letter for my children. This is a time capsule of their life. And so I have to kind of bring it back and be like, this is who this is for. And then just concentrate on shooting and being creative. So
yeah, last time we spoke, I think that was probably my biggest takeaway, is that sometimes you're going to have duds. You're going to have photos that don't resonate with a lot of people. Maybe they don't even resonate with you so much. And that's what you had said. You said, this isn't necessarily for me, but this is for my children, as they will see these photos as winners when they get older. So on top of taking photos for your family and documenting that, are you doing anything to ensure, like, I guess, let me rephrase that. What are you doing to ensure that these photos make it into the future? What do you do with them after they get edited?
So I post every day on social media, which is not something that my children, my 14-year-old is now on Instagram, which is scary. But yeah, but I print a book at the end of every year. And so that gets looked through constantly. And it is a thick book because I do one picture per page. So it's 365 pages.
Oh my goodness.
And with that picture, I always, when I post them, for anybody that follows me on social media, you'll notice that I post a picture, I post what day it is, and then I usually write a little something. And sometimes it can be something quite simple, but often it's a bit of a reflection on the day or something that I want my children to see or read. Because I feel like when you're in it as a parent, at the end of the day, you kind of lay there and you go, oh crap, I should have said this to them. I could have handled this differently. And so it's my hope that they see this and read these things and they can see how I loved them and how I saw them as people, as people who were emerging in this world and in our home, and as a family. And so I'll also include whatever thought I've written for the day in that book as well. So it really becomes a visual diary for them. And then the other thing that I do is I do a slideshow. And so, we'll be laying in bed in the morning and our bed, my husband's in my bedroom, we share a wall with the living room. And then all of a sudden I'll hear the music come on and they're watching the slideshow, and they're sort of reliving all these moments from the year. And it's really quite cute to see because they're not on social media. And unless I print them, which I do every season, I switch out some of the pictures in the house, they don't really see them. Mm-hmm. So it's nice for them to be like, oh yeah, I remember that day and that day. And it also, I think that it's important, especially, and I do talk about this in the course too, where your kids, a lot of people, one of the biggest things that people say to me is like, my kids hate the camera. Like every time I pull it out, they groan, they roll their eyes. They don't want, some kids run from it. Like, like they start crying and I'm like, well, okay, kid. Yeah. But I think that when they see the importance of the photographs, and this is something like, cause my kids, it's been 6 years. So we kind of go take in turns where one child is a little less, willing than the others. And so I just, I never bribed a day in my life. I just say to them, those books we have, the slideshow that we watch, how much you enjoy those. This is part of that. These are our memories. You're never going to be 7 again. We're never going to have this moment again. So I'm going to take 5 minutes. We're going to take the photograph and then you carry on and do whatever you're doing. And it's just a simple conversation like that. And that's why I feel that it is so important to print your photographs, to have them visual so that the kids can see them and enjoy them, because that makes sense to them, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. Seeing themselves, remembering what was going on, and
Yeah.
seeing it from that different perspective, for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
Uh, every year I do a little yearbook. Now this isn't much traditionally. Up until this year, it's just been like cell phone photos that I took. As I
Yeah.
would, again, I think we talked about this last time. I would see my cameras here behind me as like a professional tool, and whenever I picked one up, I would get into like this professional mode, and I really wasn't taking a lot of personal photographs, but I would just use my
Yeah.
phone to capture these things. More snapshots, nothing with intention, and I would build a yearbook out of these, and even
Yeah.
just those. I mean, it's
Mhm.
incredible to see Charlie now that he's 7. He's become, much more self-aware than our 3-year-old.
Yeah.
There's a moment where I guess it was about 6 months or so ago. He had this idea. He got $20. He's like, if I buy $20 worth of candy bars, I'm gonna take them to school and I'm gonna turn it into like $100.
Oh my God.
And I
A
was
little
like,
entrepreneur. That's
yeah,
amazing.
exactly. And I was like, okay, like let's do it. So I let him do it. Uh, well, he went to school and he got like pre-orders, right? He asked people like, how many candy bars do you want to buy, so that he could buy the right amount of candy bars. So we had to buy 45 candy bars. And then
Oh
the
my
next day he
God.
went back to school and only one person brought $1. And
Oh,
I remember driving him home from school. I have the picture, and it's the cover of our yearbook this year. But he's looking at that dollar like, not defeated that he just spent $45 on candy bars to only get $1 back,
yeah.
but just looking at it like, wow, like this can happen. Like you
Yeah.
could see that the wheels were turning.
Yeah.
And again, that wasn't a photo that was taken with any sort of intention. It was just simply a snapshot.
Yeah.
Now this year that I've been participating in this daily photo challenge, I can already tell I am so excited for this year's yearbook, because
Mhm.
not only are we still taking photos of these moments, but now the production quality is a little bit
Yeah.
higher. And
Yeah.
now I've realized that I'm getting a lot more creative with my photos as well. But one of the things that a lot of people are talking about in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group is that it almost feels like they're being pushed to take photos, and sometimes that doesn't make them feel creative. It doesn't release that creative energy, I suppose. So
Oh, okay.
let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously your course, Creative Every Day, tackles just that, creatively,
Yeah.
or creativity. So why do you think, if you had to guess, that people struggle so much with creativity?
I definitely do talk about that in that, and I think that it's a little less about their own creativity and more about um, comparing themselves to other people is what I really find. I think that all of a sudden you get bogged down and think that your creativity isn't matched to somebody else's. And I do it, even I do it. We look at some of the amazing photographers on Instagram or even within your own group that are putting out like this amazing work, and you start to feel a little bit inferior, like
Mm-hmm.
you're not doing enough, you're not doing as well, you're not progressing as an artist as fast as that person is. And I think that's kind of what it boils down to. And whenever I get in that frame of mind with myself, I mean, if you look at like Meg Lukes, do you know who Meg Lukes is?
Not personally, no.
Do you know her work?
I don't.
You,
No, no, no.
yeah, you got to look her up. So she's amazing. She's this amazing woman. But her work is outstanding. And I always look at it and I go, oh God, like I wish that some of my photographs looked like that. But that's not who I am. And that's not who I am as an artist. That's who she is as an artist. And I need to be able to take a step back from that and recognize that within myself and then focus on my own art. And I always in my head just say, put your head down and do what you do. That's it. Just every time you get going like that and you start spinning a little bit and doubting, that self-doubt is so bad. You just got to be like, I just put your head down and do what you do. And sometimes it helps for people to take a break from the groups and Instagram and whatever, but it takes a while to get to that, to get it's good practice, good self-aware practice to just go, this is what that is. It's not that your creativity is stifled or that you don't want to do this. It's more that you just need to just focus on yourself, and just all you have to do is just pick your camera up every day. That's it. And it'll come. And and I do talk about, when you get into those ruts, how to break out of them. And
why do you think people struggle with that though? Like, why do you think, like, we have these cameras, they're expensive, we want to take great photos, we know that they take great photos.
Yeah.
Why would you say that it's an animosity towards a camera, that it's not getting what it is that you want, that makes you put it down? Do you have any insight on that?
I think that it might just be disappointment, or because this is like, even for me as an artist who's been doing this for so many years, I mean, every time that I take a photo, it's building on me as an artist. It's continuing to let me progress. And so sometimes you don't see that progression when you're in it that very day, but at the end of the year, you're going to look back on that time where you maybe were starting to feel a bit resentful of the project, or resentful of the camera, or tired, or if you're doing lots of client work, like I have a full client load, and still, and like there are days when I don't want to pick up my camera. Like I'm tired of it. I've been, if I've shot a 12-hour day in the life, do you think I want to go home and take a picture of my kids? Not really. And so that's the other thing that I chat about, is giving yourself some grace. If you don't want to pick the camera up that day, don't. It's okay. There's some tricks and things that I do that allow me to complete this project and give myself some grace. So I think that's really important. Although I do definitely advocate that you need to pick your camera up every day. There's some days when, like, it's okay. It's okay to just give it the finger, and you pick it up the next day, get some fresh eyes on it, So I think that that's too where people get caught up on the rigidity, is that's even a word, of a 365 project. I am a fan of cheating. I have done this for 6 years. I have cheated many times. I keep a folder in my Lightroom of extras. So if I take 3 photos in one day that are of good 365 quality, I'm going to tuck 2 of those photos in my extra folder and post 1 photo. So on those days where I'm like, I'm tired, or I've been at a birth all day, or I've been sick or something, I have a little collection of pictures that I can pull out and post. And it just gives people, it just relieves that pressure and that frustration and that sort of animosity towards it, I think, and just allows it a little bit of grace that some people just need, because you don't want to get to that point where you're not enjoying your art anymore because of this project. I would never want somebody to feel that way about themselves as an artist. So
yeah, that's a rough thing. That's a rough thing. I know that because we've been, asked to self-quarantine and be home right now during this time, I asked like how many people are still shooting, how many people are still using their cameras. Yep. I think traditionally people want to go out, they want to capture fun and interesting and new things, rather than just shooting the things that are at home. That's not where their head goes immediately when they think of photography. So right now, when we're forced to be home, or asked to be home, I guess, there's a very interesting time. What are you doing to document this crazy time in your life?
Well, I've made sure that I've been true to what's going on. I've taken a lot of photos that are a bit more documentary style, to just really, I think that as documentarians and artists, we have a greater purpose in this time to really be intentional in our shooting, to document this, and for ourselves and for our children. It's an incredible moment in history, and I think that gets lost a little bit in the frustration of what's happening. And I don't want the kids to look back and there not be any evidence of it,
Yeah.
like this is what we're living. And so although the other part of it is that we don't know how this is going to affect everybody, including our children, when it's all done. If you talk about in in a mental illness sort of a capacity, when you're in it, you have a tendency to not be feeling that way. But once the dust settles, a lot of people might struggle. And so in my mind, I was thinking, this is going to be they're obviously going to have their own memories of it, but this is going to be their visual diary of it. And so I want to make sure that although I am documenting our time and being truthful, I'm also showing them the beauty of these moments, of these slow moments of us at home, and not a lot of photos of us out and about. I mean, we live, in a beautiful part of Canada that we have a lot of wide open spaces and not a lot of people. So we can get out a little bit, but, there's the underlying, like, there's beauty in everything, right? So there is beauty in this, even though it's frustrating. So I have taken a number of photos that have been quite powerful. I took a photo of my son when I took my oldest son to Costco with me. As a teenager cooped up in home for weeks at a time, I thought, okay, I haven't been taking the kids out anywhere that's public, the little ones, but I thought, you can come out with me. And we had our masks on, and he was shocked because he hadn't, the last time he was out was school, right? And so he was like, oh my God, this is so strange. It's sort of apocalyptic, like. And so I took a photo of him in Costco with his mask on, and our Costco cart. Obviously, we're a family of 5, so even on a good day, our Costco cart is full. But, and it's sort of, it's sad, and but it's powerful, and, so I'm trying my best to document, but also find the beauty in it. And I've been filming. I do a lot of family films for other people, and I always film our vacations, but I don't often do a lot of films of our daily life at home. And so I've been filming our daily life as well. So I'm hoping after all this is done, we'll have a little quarantine family film to look back on that, should also provide some happy memories from this strange time. So that's what I'm doing.
That's gonna be very cool. That's gonna be something, looking back as a kid, or looking back, I guess, as an adult at your childhood. Mm-hmm. That's gonna be something that's gonna be really powerful. I love that. On top of the book and the films, you're just nonstop. You're like, let's go. Let's keep creating these things.
Well, yeah, like, if I'm not, that on top, like, I'm just not shooting any clients in this time. I mean, I have that extra time to be able to, to document a bit more than usual, really. So
yeah,
right.
It's interesting. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that, because, like, this, oftentimes when I hate to say when I'm forced to work, but when I'm at a wedding, I find myself to be the most creative, because I'm there. I have, no other outside influences. I'm there for one purpose, and I'm trying to do the best that I can for them. And having just a little bit of pressure behind me pushes me to do something different, a little bit unique. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But oftentimes when I'm just home, very rarely do I, hey, let's try this shot. Hey, let's do this thing. Hey, let's do that thing. But I have found personally that over these past few weeks, I have been going bananas on different types of shots and getting things done. But when it comes to actually coming up with these creative ideas, I had to go out and find inspiration, right? Like, well, what are other people doing? These ideas don't come natural to me, these photos that I'm taking. I'm essentially emulating somebody else to figure out how I can make it work and then make it my own.
Yeah.
When it comes to creativity, is that cheating? Is that against the rules? Should creativity be coming purely out of your brain and just spill onto whatever medium you're using, or is this okay? Do I have a free pass from you?
You have a free pass, and we all do the same thing. I mean, and I chat about that because, like, double exposures and
That's
like,
exactly it. That's what I've been
you know
working
what I
on.
mean? Like
Yeah.
there's everything goes through waves. There was a time when we were all putting plastic bags over our lenses and free lensing and all these things. And so I give a list of creative boosters that I use whenever I'm feeling the need to be creative. And people can add on to that with their own creative boosters, but they can build off of that. And that's, I and this is all just, all these creative boosters are things that I've picked up from other people. I was not the first person to put fairy lights in front of my lens or use a prism, or this was all coming from from other people. And you can kind of trace back to kind of who started the trend of who the double exposure masters were and the prism masters. And they kind of all start from somewhere, but that whole list that I give is all, none of it came, well, maybe a couple, but most of it, 99% of it, did not come from my own brain. It's all just evolved from other people and things that I've seen. And thankfully, the photography industry has changed so much in even just 10 years, where people are happy to give their information. They're happy. There's not like, oh no, I did this and I'm going to hang on to it and you can't have it. If anybody was to go on my Instagram and type, hey, how did you do that? I am more than happy to be like, well, grab the fairy lights out of your thing and like, this is what you want to do. And so everybody's more than happy to share their information. We're all supporting each other and lifting each other up. And so that's what I think is so important about like, the beginner photography group, and we have a daily occurrence group, and everybody's like, I'm going to try panning this week. I've done that where I've been like, here's a panning shot I took of my son in the snow. This is how I took it. So like, and then all of a sudden you see 20 panning shots. Everybody's trying panning that week, so you kind of just, it's so great to just be able to kind of push each other on to try new things. Right. And then you make it your own. So you get a free pass and so does everybody else.
Yes. Yeah. I gotta say, if photographers weren't as willing to share their thoughts and their, I don't know, quote unquote trade secrets, I would not be here right now talking with you. I wouldn't be talking to, anybody essentially.
No.
Everybody would just be keeping it. I can't imagine what this would be like, years ago, which is, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be able to talk to photographers like yourself. And this is fun for me. This is fun for me. But you said something really interesting there, which was, when you're feeling kind of in a creative rut, you have this list of these creativity boosters, Do you find now that when you're at home, kind of, once again, stuck at home for lack of a better term, do you find that you're using those creativity boosters more or less than you were before?
Probably a little bit more, especially in the seasons where like we have less snow here and more rain. When we're indoors and it's raining for weeks on end, that's definitely when I pull it out. And I talk about like, like going back to the details of your life. If you're like the kid, there's nothing to shoot. You're in the house. There's no light, there's no beautiful sunlight streaming through the windows. Cause that's where a lot of our photographs are driven, is by light moments. When you have nothing like that happening, I am a big fan of, a strong portrait. When was the last time you took a portrait of your 7-year-old?
Yesterday. But before that, I mean, it was a long...
Like all of us, you'll go months and you'll realize like, oh, for me, Sophie's about to turn 8 and I don't remember the last time I just took a very simple black and white portrait of just her, nothing, like, so you got to go back to the basics. I've taken pictures of the little curl on the back of her hair and the way that it goes down her neck and things like that, you all of a sudden you have to train your mind to be like, okay, let's simplify it. Let's not think big, and let's go, okay, what's going on right now that's not going to be happening in a couple months from now? How are things changing? How can I document that just very simply, right? So, that's definitely when I break out that kind of thought process, is when I'm feeling like, there's nothing exciting. There's nothing exciting happen here, and there's no gorgeous light. like what's happening, and just kind of think about, I mean, I've got 3 kids, so I've got a lot to, some people only have just the one child. And so that's been a common complaint, is like, well, I've just got 1 kid, that kind of limits the subject matter. And then that's when I say to start taking self-portraits.
Yeah.
So, right, there's that as well too, right? Whenever I'm feeling like I'm in a rut, the best thing that I could ever do for myself is to take a self-portrait. That brings me out of a rut every single time. And you're getting in the frame, which is huge.
Yeah, not that, which is doesn't happen very often as
Does not happen
as a
very
family
often.
photographer.
No.
So let me talk about these self portraits for a second, or let's talk about those. I'm not talking about them. You're talking about them. When it comes to self portraits, this whole month I've been talking about like some simple challenges that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're listening, back in April, I was talking about challenges that we can do at home. And the first one that I did was a self-portrait, because lots of people have an aversion to taking a self-portrait. And I figured if that's challenge number 1, get it out of the way. It doesn't even have to, like, you don't even have to really try. Just get in front of the camera, take a photo of yourself, get it out of the way, and then you can grow from there. When you're taking self-portraits, or when you suggest to others to take self-portraits, are these is the goal of the self-portrait to take a beautiful self-portrait, or is it to feel vulnerable? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. So I take self-portraits for a number of different reasons. One of them definitely is to, if I'm working through something personally, often I'll take a self-portrait, and that is a form of sort of counseling, if you will, therapy. And it helps me work through that. The other reason I take them, obviously, is to get in the frame with my children. And then I hate folding laundry, as does everybody, I'm sure. But one day I was feeling particularly ornery about the laundry, because it just never ends. You get the baskets empty, and you're like, the baskets are empty, and then it literally, like, it seems within minutes they're full again. I mean, it's not minutes, but that's what it feels like.
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
Anyways, and there's a certain time of year that the sun streams right through our laundry room. And so I just thought, if I'm feeling ornery about this, maybe I should document it. And so I end up using self-portraits as a way to document motherhood. So there's sort of 3 ways that I go about it. And so for when I tell people to get in front of the frame, those are kind of the 3 guidelines that I give them. What are you documenting? What is the feeling that you want to convey? And what kind of moments do you want to have? What are the moments that you have with your children that are important to you, that you want to be in the frame with them, right? So if you look through my self-portraits, I try and take 1 a week all year. So for the past 3 years, I've done 52 self-portraits a year. And so they are like a good mixture of all of those things. And so last year, my daughter was face painting. She's an incredible, she was 6. She was 6, and people would hire her to come and face paint at events.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
cool.
She was, and the kids just loved her because she was little, and they were, so she was so popular and cute, and everybody would line up. It was just adorable. But for about a month, she wanted to face paint us every day, right? Like, okay, Mom, can I face paint you? And I'm like, well, I gotta,
Yeah.
I gotta go to work.
Right
Like, I don't
now.
want a big like flower on my cheek. So anyway, so I
That's
just
adorable.
that was one of those instances where I was like, before this, because she might not be face painting forever, obviously, before this finishes, I want to make sure that I get a shot of her face painting me. And so, those are the kind of things. And I suggest to just keep a list on the notes in your phone. Like, when something comes to you, write it down, so that when you're having one of these sort of days where you're thinking of what you want to shoot, well, now might be a time to get that shot, reading a book with your son, or, you know, a bedtime story, or playing Monopoly with your old, you know, like all those sorts of things. And when you're going through something personally, the last thing I find, for me, the last thing that I want to do is get in front of the frame, but I never regret it, ever. And it is a bit tricky at first, and it's uncomfortable, but it eventually gets easier. Every time you do it, it definitely gets easier. So.
And I would assume that you could take your own advice that you give to kids, like, hey, look, this is just 5 minutes.
It's 5
We're going to
minutes.
document this, and then we're going to get on with whatever we were doing.
You love these photos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
I had a question because, as I was saying, when I went through some of the reviews to hear what people were saying about your course, there was a review, and I should have written down the name, and of course I didn't because I'm a big dummy, but the review said, talking about you specifically, Ashley, her creative spin on everyday moments is exactly what I've been wanting to achieve. And that got me thinking, what do you think that quote-unquote creative spin is?
I don't know. I guess it's just how I see things. I don't know. There actually is a chapter in the course that says, this is how I see it. So I do articulate it there, but I think that I've developed over the years a certain style, and some would call it your artistic voice. And it takes time, and it takes practice, and it's ever evolving, and it's changing. And I think that I have a way of helping the mundane or the normal look a little bit magical. But I think that everybody has that capability. It's just how you see it, and it does help us appreciate those moments more, for sure. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers that question, but
no, it does. It does. I find it always interesting to hear from other photographers, because I think as new photographers, what you want to know is how to shoot like the photographers who you like, who are producing images that you like. But it's hard to articulate exactly what that is, because, well, that's just all that you know. You know, it's all that you've ever seen. But early on, I would guess, you know, as a photographer, you were probably taking photos that maybe you weren't happy with, or that you didn't feel like was at your full potential. So if you could go back and tell that Ashley one thing about getting photos that she loved consistently later on, what do you think that would be?
I think it would be to just keep trying, to just keep at it, because I think that your first response is to put your camera down. You know, that's your first, like, you're frustrated, you don't want to pick it up. And that was definitely me, you know, and like we talked about before, people that are feeling the same way. And I think you just have to just keep shooting. That's sort of been my blanket answer for a lot, because it's so true. Keep shooting, keep working on your editing, your consistent editing. You know, that takes time too. Like, and you don't need a lot. Like, you can do so much in Lightroom. Like, you know, you don't need to overdo it. You know, I think that if you sort of simplify it, and I encourage people in the course to like write down their reasons for why they want to do this. And you need to keep going back to your reasons. And so I think that the multiple times that I was spinning out in my own thoughts of self-doubt and frustration, I should have gone back to my reasons a lot quicker than what I had. And so the purpose of a daily occurrence is for me to streamline that process for people so that it doesn't take them as long as what it took me
Yeah.
to understand. And so, write down the reasons, have them visible to you when you're by your computer or on your fridge. So when you're feeling that, you just go right back. It just grounds you, puts your feet back on the ground for a second. And so maybe that's what I wish that I would have learned a hell of a lot quicker, because it would have saved me a lot of anxiety and self-doubt and frustration on my part as an artist. So
Wow. Yeah, I know right now, if I were to list my reasons why, I would probably put it on the fridge, as I probably see it more than I look at my computer these
these
days, being
days,
stuck
yeah,
at home. Yeah.
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 Or put it
Uh,
where you keep your camera too, right?
oh yeah. Oh,
I,
that's a
su-
good one. It
I
forces
suggest to
you.
have your camera out in a place where you can grab it easily all the time. And if you put it there right beside it, then you have a chance to peek at that before you shoot.
Would you be willing to share your reasons why?
Yes, of course. I think that sometimes they change, but my number one reason is obviously the children, that this is for them. Although this project has created a lot of opportunity for me professionally, the bottom line of this, the very heart and soul of this, is that it's for them and it's for me. And that's the number one thing for me. And just to grow as an artist, this is an opportunity for growth. And so I think that's what you have to think of too once in a while, is that this isn't the finality. You're still growing. You're always growing and you're always evolving. And so when I started this project, the first year I worked on light, and how I see light. In the second year, I worked on like emotion. And so every year I kind of would focus on one thing or another. And then I started really getting creative, where I started doing underwater work and using a drone. And, so it was just ever evolving and always learning. And I think that's another one of the reasons too, is that this doesn't end for me. This is not an end point. This is always a growing situation. So.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great way to look at this time that we're in right now, as
Mm-hmm.
continue learning, continue to grow. This
Yeah.
isn't a time to take a break. This is a time to hit the
No.
gas.
And you want to, like, and I was very honest with my little group there in A Daily Occurrence. I popped on and did a live about a week after this had all started, because I did not want to pick up my camera. I think that I think like everybody, we were kind of in that like shock mode, where we just didn't really know what to do with ourselves. There was so much information and so much going on. And I just, like, I had to force myself to pick up my camera, and I took multiple days off, which is very strange for me. Felt very foreign. And so I just popped on and was super honest, and as I am. And I just said, like, is anybody else feeling like this? It's okay. We're in this together, and then now it's like, okay, now as things start to, we kind of have a bit of a, not a lull, but like, we're hitting a bit of a stride here. We're all starting to pick up our cameras and finding ways to be creative and document this time together. So
Yeah. One thing that I've been working on a lot during this time is the edits that I have just in my personal photos. Not so much my professional work. I feel like I have some sort of consistency in that I enjoy. I want to keep working on that. But
yeah,
as far as my personal photos go, the editing has been really fun for me during this time. And you
yeah.
talked about your editing a little bit there. So oftentimes beginners think as the capture as the creative. But can you talk to me about the creative role that editing has in your work?
I actually love editing. So I have a very clean edit. I like things to be sort of as true to, I don't use Photoshop at all. That's not to say that some of my photos are not photoshopped because I have a Photoshop guy that if I need a head swap or something, I basically just email it to him. So, once in a while it is useful, but I use Lightroom solely for all of my work. And black and white is definitely one of my favorite things. And it's taken me a few years, but I've really honed in my black and white work for sure. So I think that for me, everything is vibrant and colorful. I know that like muted tones and gray grass is kind of in right now, but I like just bring out the colors. Like I'm just a big fan of, our life is colorful and I want to show that, so I do in the course there are editing videos, and so I go through my editing process for both black and white and color. And there are shooting videos as well. So you really get to see the whole streamlined process of how I work, both, inside the home, out in the wild, underwater, and there's a little bit on drones as well. So you get to kind of see how the ideas evolve, whether naturally with the kids or even with the drone work. Like we did a shot where the kids, and we had thought about this for months, where the kids did a chalk drawing on the ground, and my son Noah did a huge dragon, and Tate did some dinosaurs, and Sophie did a rainbow with a mushroom. And then we put them into the drawing. So she was sitting on the mushroom and Noah was protecting her from the dragon, and we drew a big sword in his hand, and then Tate was getting eaten by dinosaurs. And then so we popped the drone up. And so, this was an idea that we had thought of as a family for a while. And I want to do one for quarantine too, where I'm laying on the ground pretending to run and they're chasing after me, and I want to do like a big help, so you can see that from above. So like, it's just how these ideas sort of take form and are shot and then edited later on. Like it's nice to kind of see the whole streamline process, because that's what people, I feel, are most curious about, is like, okay, well, we see it online, but like, how did you get to that point, right? So and the editing is such a huge part of that. So
I love that. That's great. That's not I don't think a lot of people would have went there, but I like that view of the edit. That's very fun. That's very fun. I have two last questions for you. I know that we've gone well over our time here. Do you have
We've had a good visit.
Yeah, it's been a blast. It's definitely been a blast. But do you have time for these two last questions?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so within the group, Kimberly asked me a long time ago, as I was telling you, your episode is one that just continues to strike a chord with a lot of people. And one of these listeners was Kimberly. She listens, and she told me a long time ago, like right after listening, she's like, you got to have her back on. Like, great. So before our interview, I asked her, if you could ask Ashley a question, what would it be? And she's like, well, I have 1 million, but here's 2. So she says, Ashley consistently presents images that capture a feeling of weightlessness, which makes every moment of the life she presents seem saturated and quite important. What is your secret to achieving this consistency?
Wow, Kimberly, quite the question. What is... So I'm struggling with, because it's kind of like a shooting and an editing question, because it's sort of, it's a combination of all these things that achieves this final image. I think that first and foremost, a lot of the times, the moments, like I said, I sort of shoot, my images are achieved by a few different things light being one of them, and moments being the other, and capturing a moment in time, or emotion, and then capturing a moment in time being the other thing. So first I would start out with how I'm going to accentuate a moment with the light that I'm given. And then that then once the moment is captured, then once it's put into Lightroom, I try and not, I guess I try and accentuate that. So it's sort of like I feel like it's like a boost. Like, and I do on my Instagram some straight out of cameras and then the final edit. So you can see that it's not manipulated, but just leveled up, you know?
Of course.
So the waitlist comment that's a very, I like that. I don't know if that that's a very tricky and wonderful question, but yeah,
I would think a lot of it, I would think that you probably answered a portion of this earlier when I asked you what you would tell a younger Ashley, you know, which is essentially like, just kind of keep shooting and eventually you'll find your way. Because I would assume that your first year's worth of photos probably look nothing like your photos today. Is that pretty safe to assume?
There definitely are a handful of favorites that I still hold quite, and you'll be able to see, and I chat about this as well, where I call them game changers, where you'll take a photo and you'll publish it, or put it on your social media or put it in a book, and you'll see that was a changing moment for you. You'll notice that your intentional shooting was different. The way that you saw the light was different. The way that you shot it was, they're game changers. And so there are a few photos in that first year where I know that they're game changers, and I can see very similar attributes in those photos to the photos that I have 6 years later. So yes, there are lots of learning moments, of course, but there are those few where those are big growth photographs, right? So
yeah. Oh, I love that. It's just that personal development I love so much, that when you
yeah.
figure it out, like you said, that moment, you're like, oh, this is different. This is a little bit different. That's a very good feeling.
That's why, like, and this course is not just for 365ers. Like, of course it will, if you want to complete a 365, like, this is definitely something for you. But even if you just want to be more intentional with your shooting, if you just want to be more creative, if you just want the push to pick up your camera every day or document your life at home, not in a 365 project, but just in general, this is why this is so incredibly beneficial for you. And it's just helpful in all those ways, really.
Yeah.
So you'll see at the end of your year, or even whether it's a full 365 or just general shooting, you'll see a huge difference between your images at the beginning of this journey to the end. And you won't feel that when you're in the moment, but you'll definitely see it at the end. And it might be your push to the next year, either to actually do a 365 project or just to keep going. So
Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing that. That's some powerful insight. She had one last question for you, which was simply, which artists in any genre, photography, music, painting, etc., influence your work currently the most?
There's a few photographers that I love that definitely have pushed me to be a better photographer myself. I find that I have strong compositional skills, but there are some photographers out there, like, they are on a different level than me. Like, it is how do you pronounce his last name? Fer Wasteri, Fer. Juir. Anyways, he's amazing. He does weddings and families down in Mexico, and he just blows my mind. Summer Murdoch, she's a constant source of inspiration to me. Nikki Boone. Nikki Boone is an Australian photographer. She has, I think, 4 kids, and they literally live in the backcountry of Australia. And most of her work is black and white. And she just does like mind-blowing documentarian work with her kids. For painters, and I'm not inspired too much. I will constantly put on a 90s playlist while I work, which is not all that inspiring. But my husband is an artist. He is a carver. He's First Nations. And so our household is definitely art filled. And I think that I have a deep appreciation for all the arts, but I definitely have a deep appreciation for him as an artist. And he inspires me daily. He's been carving as an artist as a career for 20 years. And so, yeah, and he is world renowned, and he is humble and amazing. And so we sort of build off of each other. And I think that that's been really important for our kids to see, because there is a sort of a stigma for the poor, starving artist. And that is not how we've lived our life. And so all of our kids are artistic. And so we encourage them that they can do this. Photographers can make a living, and artists can make a living, and be happy and do what they love. And so it's just nice for our kids to see that anything is possible, really. So yeah, so he's probably my favorite artist.
That's perfect. That was perfect. Oh man, I know. I feel oftentimes, when I look at, obviously as a photographer, having that technical ability to see how a photo is taken, I can look at other people's work and be inspired by it, but I still see it in my head, like, this is how the photo was taken. But when it comes to painting, when it comes to carving, when it comes to doing pretty much anything physical, I guess, with your hands, or creating anything tangible, I look at it with just complete awe, because it doesn't make sense to my brain.
No.
And it's fantastic stuff. And when somebody can do it well, it's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother thing.
We've been together since I was 16, and it continues to blow my mind. Like, we have literally like trees in our yard, like cut, logs, and over time they become these incredible pieces, masks and boxes and totem poles and house posts. And I'm like, you created that out of that tree in our front yard, that's been seasoning and all these. I mean, that's what he's been doing for the past weeks, is like cutting up these gorgeous cedar trees, and they'll turn into these incredible works of art and be all over the world. And it always and forever blows my mind. It never seems to get old, really. So
oh, that's perfect. Well, I don't know how we could end any better than that. The figuring out, where that source of creativity comes from. So I just have to say thank you for coming on and sharing everything that you did. I know that the listeners are going to get a ton out of this episode. So before I let you go, can you let them know where they can follow you and keep up with everything that you're doing online?
Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Ashley Marston Photography, and I post every day. I'm very active. I'm always open to questions. You can DM me anytime. That's pretty much probably the best way to get a hold of me. So I'm always around. I'm always up for a chat. So.
Oh, perfect. Well, I will put links, of course, to your Instagram, as well as your website and your course within the show notes of this episode for people to find. But again, Ashley, I just have to say thank you for coming on and sharing everything that you did.
Thank you, Raymond.
Now you can see why Ashley's episode back in 139 was probably one of the most downloaded episodes, and I have a feeling that this will be one as well. Ashley just has this great way of connecting with you and just really having a real, honest good conversation that makes you feel like you're a part of something just a little bit bigger than yourself. And she really has this great way of communicating her ideas to you that A, inform you, and 2, just get you really excited. So I love talking with Ashley. And Ashley, if you're listening, thank you so much for spending the time to chat with me. Even though halfway through the interview, her computer completely crashed and we had to start all over. It was like a 30-minute ordeal. And she was still, I mean, when she got back on, and it was like we never stopped talking. It was just a continued conversation. And that just speaks to the power of who she is. It just makes it really easy to dive in and really understand what it is that she's talking about. For me, my biggest takeaway is just her commitment to finding that balance between personal and professional, the snapshot and creative. It's so interesting because as, I can attest to this as well, as a, paid photographer who gets paid to go shoot things, you are kind of in a different mindset when you shoot things professionally than you are when you shoot things personally. And like I said, just finding that balance between the two for her is really incredible, and something that I strive for. And it's just clear how, just in her speaking, that creativity is a muscle. It's not a set of rules. It's not a, well, you either have it or you don't type of thing. It is a muscle. And if you practice it every day, it is just going to get stronger and stronger. And I know that sounds, cliche, but that's the truth. That's the truth. How could you expect to, be good at riding a bike if you haven't ridden a bike in, 30 years? You don't. You're not going to be as good at riding a bike as somebody who's been riding that same bike down trails, taking jumps and stuff, I don't know, for 30 years. Bring that same practice into photography, and every day you're going to grow a little bit more. And I think it's exponential. It's probably exponential. So, the more that you grow in the beginning means the faster that you're going to grow, later on as you continue to do this. So I kind of went off there. Anyway, I would love to know what your biggest takeaway for this episode was here with Ashley Marston, as she shared a ton of great stuff. And again, I would love to hear what you took away. So leave a comment in the members only group, Facebook group for beginner photography, the listeners. I really screwed that up. Leave your biggest takeaway in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. I was trying to tie all those words in there together. Ashley's in the group. I'm sure that she would love to hear your biggest takeaway as well, and what it was that resonated with you the most. And as I mentioned in there, there's also links to find Ashley on Instagram, as well as her new course, Creative Photography Every Day. So check that out. Go check that out. All right, that is it for this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Until next week, I want you to make do. I want you to make more. I want you to do more. And I want you to make do with what you got, because I promise you it's better than you think. All right, see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.